欢迎各位回到会场，继续参加接下来的讨论。本次的讨论呢，将是由
Welcome to our forum back.
2.0新政的全球治理与国际合作。有请所有嘉宾上台。
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. The title of our opening panel discussion is Presaging the Future of Global Governance under Trump 2.0 and will be chaired by CCG founder and president Henry Huiyao Wang. Without further ado, I would like to begin by inviting all of our distinguished guests to the stage, all of our panelists, and I will read your names out. First, we have Amitav Acharya, Distinguished Professor of International Relations and the UNESCO Chair in Transnational Challenges and Governance at the School of International Service, American University. Welcome. Mohammed Amersi, Founder and Chairman of the Amersi Foundation. Chen Weiling, Academic Council Member, Center for China and Globalization, Chief Economist of China Center for International Economic Exchange. Michelle Gerasi, former Undersecretary of State, Ministry of Economic Development, Republic of Italy. Susanna Jessup, Chief Executive, Asia New Zealand Foundation. Jin Xin, Director General of the Research Office of the Institute of World Political at the International Department of the CCP Central Committee. Liu Shijian, former Vice President, Vice Minister, Development Research Center of the State Council of China. Lu Ruchuan, President, CNPC Economics and Technology Research Institute. Jeff Nankivel, President and CEO, Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Felix Valdivieso, Chairman of China Center, IE University. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Great, we're starting now the exciting part of our conference, and we're going to talk about the presaging the future of global governance in the Trump 2.0 era, actually. So as we have actually experienced this morning various keynote, and also discussions. We were mentioned quite a few times, and we are getting into a new era of the post actually the Trump first term. Now we are getting into the second term. But I think the world witnessed a series of pivotal events that will shape the global landscape. Of course, among those events, the U.S. president election stands out as one of the critical moments now for all of us to think. So we are very pleased to have so many distinguished panelists to join us. And of course, we have all the participants here, our global young leaders, our diplomatic from different embassy, and of course, a variety of global think tanks representative, and of course, our media partners, and of course, a lot of business representatives are here. So it's really a great occasion to have this discussion. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists for this morning discussion, and then I will pose some questions, and then we will start. I think, because we have so many people, we will have our also two global young leaders come up to pose some questions after our discussion. So first I'd like to introduce as alphabetically Amitav Acharya. He's the Distinguished Professor of International Relations and the UNESCO Chair in Transnational Challenges and Governance at American University. And then we have Mohammed Amersi, founder and chairman of the Amersi Foundation from UK. And also Madame Chen Wenling, he's an academic council member of CCG, but also the chief economist of China Center for International Economic Exchange, CCIEE. And we have Michael Girici, former Undersecretary of State, Minister of Economic Development, Government of Italy. And of course, we have also Ms. Susan Jessup, Chief Executive, Asia New Zealand Foundation, which is also a great, very active organization in New Zealand. And we have Dr. Jin Xin, actually, he's the Director General of Research Office of the Institute of World Political Parties of the International Department of CPC Central Committee. So a policy director at CPC, the Asian Department. And another, we have Dr. Professor Liu Sijin. He's the former vice president or former vice minister of Development Research Center of the State Council of China, which is a big think tank. This is one of the biggest think tanks in China. And we have Lu Quan, the president, CNPC Economics and Technology Research Institute. Mr. Lu, Professor Lu, is also one of the famous think tanks. It's on the industry, particularly in the energy sector. And we have Jack Nakville. He's still on his way. And also Flexi Vidiviso. He's the chairman of China Center, IE University in Spain. So we have a very good sample, a very good panel for this very very fresh and very exciting topic. So I'd like to propose some questions, and just to start with. So what do you all think? What does Trump 2.0 mean for the global economy and the markets? How will the President Trump's elect approach to the trade impact and global supply chains, the multinational trading system, the broader global economic order, and of course the national strategy we are installed to cope with that? For example, he just announced that he's going to raise tariff on all the BRICS if they're going to use a different currency, which is a big, a very big news in the last 2 days. And also, the other point is that Trump actually withdrew from his first term quite a few multilateral system, climate change agreement, WHO, and all the things. So how would that climate changes and other topics continue? And what about the existing global system, like United Nations, like G20, particularly also BRICS? Are those how that going to really evolve, including G7 as well? So what can be done to improve on that? And how will the competition and cooperation also between the two largest economies in the world, China and US, to what kind of impact that's going to bring to the international community? So those are the questions that we generally put forward, but look forward to the hearing your thought. So let's maybe each person maybe will use let's say 4 or 5 minutes to give you answers, and then we have some questions from our global young leaders. So why don't I start with Professor Jin Xin, since you are the policy chief at CPC, the Asian Department. But let's be brief, as we maybe 5 minutes for each intervention. Professor Jin, please.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Wang Huiyao for the invitation. This forum is a place that has produced a lot of wonderful thoughts. I'm here to listen. I'm engaged in policy research. I'm not in a good position to say a lot, but I'm here to listen. But I know that usually as we approach the end of the year, the main think tanks are all making predictions about the new year, what will happen, what will be the big events, what will be the global risks. And we know that they are rolling out their perceptions about the coming new year. But we know that it is a risky thing to make such predictions. But we have a common understanding. That is to say, the whole world is in a new round of major adjustments and changes. And turmoils, uncertainties are still the key words in international relations, especially since the re-election of President Trump. There have been a lot of concerns, also concerns from the U.S. allies too. So probably with his re-election, there will be uncertainties in the world. We hope that the new U.S. administration will provide more public goods to the international community. We also hope that next year, when we are celebrating the new anniversary of the UN, we can work together to improve global governance. I'm engaged in research on global political party politics. We hope that we can also adopt this perspective in seeing the changes of the era and the changes of perceptions. And especially we need to pay attention to the rise of populism and its impact on the global pattern, world economy, and global governance.
I personally think that populism, at least, is rising due to some reasons. And one of the reasons is that the globalization didn't benefit all in a balanced manner, and the capitalism is pursuing the interest only, and the management of the international organizations is chaotic. So the pursuit for the interest by the capitalism is in a very radical and extreme manner. And also the social structures are suffering a lot. There is some figure from China, from US and France. We can see that the middle class, the size of the middle class is shrinking, 61% all the way down to 50% from 1960s to now in US, and the same truth applies to France. And societal structures also has been changed all the way towards a kind of a pyramid shape. And the bottom class has been expanded. So they are actually the supporters of the populism in these respective countries. And right now, in China, there's a saying from China ancient philosopher Mencius that prosperity is based on the balanced division and allocation of the assets. So we need to promote the universal and beneficial balanced benefit shared by the most people. The countries with the division cannot create values to the society. So to the countries, especially the big countries, in terms of the universally beneficial and inclusive globalization, actions need to be taken by all, because otherwise the populism will be further cultivated and no change will be made to turn around the situation. And then the division will become more exacerbated between the different parties. And this kind of long-term divisions will lead to the disruptions of the politics. So the fragmentation of the different countries, powers, especially the middle and small-sized countries, we have to care about them. The globalization and trade liberalization and trade facilitation should not be labeled by the so-called unilateral benefit. And also the structure need to be reshaped, and we have to safeguard the UN systems, and we have to support the international order with the UN as a core, and also the principles to firmly safeguard the multilateral trade systems with WTO at the whole, to support UN system, and also to support the organizations of UN, especially the big multilateral organizations and institutions to be reformed, just like being alluded to by Mr. Chatterjee, so that they can be more effective, efficient, and widely representative. And I believe that some small, medium-sized multilateral organizations, they are kind of diverse and they are supplementary. They are not dominant. And from the current situation, we would not become more and more conservative. And this kind of small organizations shall be deemed as supplementary. And the cake of the interest should be expanded to further stabilize the society or resolve the uncertainties and instability. So there are multiple parties roaming around in the world. And how to accelerate the governance or the global governance? Three things. The first one is that we have to cooperate to resolve the disruptions and fragmentations. And now, especially the two major conflicts taking place in Middle East and Europe. Stability and peace are the major note that is expected by the world. We have to guide the mentality of the world to embrace peace, to expect peace, especially countries like China and US. We have to enhance mutual trust, and we have to manage the disagreement, to set role models to other countries. And also we have to coordinate to cope with the non-traditional safety issues, like the data flow and population issues, climate issues. If we cannot handle these issues properly, they would also lead to the unconventional safety issues and security issues to the world. So the big powers, China and US are included. We can cooperate in financial sectors, in the economic and trade sectors to look for the balance that can benefit long-term prosperity, and also in the technological advancement. We also have to cooperate to support cracking down the high wall and small yard. Also, the major international framework of orders with the United Nations at the core should be also safeguarded and further supported by all parties. UN is the result after two world wars, which can balance the different powers and forces in the world. And that is the principle and the mission that we should never forget. So the authority of the UN should be guaranteed and respected. Under the framework of UN, the big powers and countries can further explore the cooperation at outer space, on offshore development, on the transportation, and so on and so forth, to come up with the solutions to contribute to the new international order. Thank you. Thank you, Director Jin Xin.
Comment, and of course you emphasized the system for UN, for our global system. This year is also the 80 years of Bretton Woods system. We cannot really start all over again. Let's work on that. Let's build on that. I think that's a good point. China is really willing to add on and to improve, enhance, and enlarge. That's exactly what we want to do. So next, I would like to have Professor Acharya. You're also the former chair of International Relations Society in the world, and of course, I know you're also kind of a professor at Schwarzman College. But you've been traveling back and forth. We had CCG had a big roundtable in Washington in May this year. You were there too. So we'd like to hear from you. You've been to so many countries, particularly now you're in the U.S. So I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you.
Let's do 5 minutes. We'll start counting.
Thank you very much, Henry and Mabel, for inviting me. Again, I have spent some time here in 2017, 16, 17, when I was teaching in Schwarzman College, and I know that. And I spoke here a few times, and it is really an honor to speak at what is, without question, the leading think tank in China on globalization and global governance. There is really no competition, and there are others doing work, but this is the one that we always listen to when we think of globalization. What is the Chinese view on globalization and global governance? Let me start by defining Trump. What do I mean by defining? Well, Trump has 5 words, T-R-U-M-P. Every word means something. Every letter, rather, means something. TR is transaction. Trump is a transactionalist, and we know what it means. He only gives as much what others can give it to him, what is in it for him. Actually, sometimes it's personal, sometimes for his base, his supporters, and to a lesser extent for the United States. The U is for unilateralist. He is a unilateralist. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't care what the world thinks, or even allies like Canada or Mexico think. It's not just China. One good thing about Trump, he doesn't discriminate. He imposes sanctions on China and also on Canada, which used to be the largest trading partner of US for a long time before China took over. So that's U. Then there is, of course, M. M is mean. Now, Trump is not going to make America great again. He is going to make America mean again. Now, United States of America is not a mean country. It's actually a very generous country. And I've lived there now for 16 plus 2 years in Harvard, 17 years. And it is not a mean country. The American people are not mean. They are very generous. They invented the idea of charity. The more charity, American people give more to charity than any other society that you can think of. It invented the multilateral system. It's not a mean country, but Trump is going to make mean again. There have been times when the United States has been mean. Ronald Reagan took US out of UNESCO, threatened countries with sanctions. Even the Cold War period, Eisenhower administration said either we're with us or against us. There have been a mean streak in US domestic and foreign policy, but it's generally not a mean country. It's a very generous country. And finally, P in Trump. This is probably the only silver lining we have in Trump, and that's peace promiser. He is not a peacemaker. We don't know that yet, but he promises to end wars. And here I go back to President Biden. Biden was not a peacemaker. Actually, Biden was a disappointment to me when it comes to the liberal international order. He was more of a minilateralist, NATO, Quad, rather than the larger UN system or WTO. And he did extremely well in domestic politics. I live in the US, I'm actually an American citizen. He was really very kind and gentle and inclusive in domestic policy, but he did not really try for peace seriously in Ukraine. And of course, we know that the severe human tragedy in Gaza when he looked on and tried to do it too little, too late. So Trump is going to be, if Trump delivers on some of his hints that he can bring about peace in Ukraine, and maybe he will restrain North Korea, which he tried and failed last time, he might actually end up doing something good. But the rest of it is kind of bad news. But so what? What is the implication for global governance? I have been a student of global governance, a little bit of a practitioner. Some UN reports I've been involved in, including our common agenda. But generally, from an academic and policy-relevant academic point of view, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. And this may sound strange to you. I just finished a book about 5,000 years of history. I look at very, very long term. And once and future world order, there's a brochure outside. We have seen this. Trump is another 4 years, a blip. And the United States will go on, global governance will go on. It just will take a different form. Just like people say we have a globalization, it's over. It's not over. It's going to take a new form. And it is taking a new form. So what's the new form then? Well, over the last 50, 60 years, since 1945, when the current global governance system was created, two things have happened. It has become less US-centric. The United States is not the dominant actor on every area of global governance. In fact, it's a laggard and kind of it has to be pushed in. Depends on the administration, but this always happens. Countries like Canada, Australia, ASEAN countries at the regional level, and European Union. The European Union ambassador didn't really deal with the European Union's contribution to global governance. He went on about EU and China. But European Union has done tremendous contribution to at least climate change governance. So United States is no longer the key actor in global governance. Secondly, the global governance system has become less UN-centric. First, US-centric, less US-centric, and less UN-centric. So I use the term multiplex to describe global governance and world order. It's not great power G1 or G7, not even G20. It's what I call G+. The governments plus private actors, civil society networks, NGOs, partnerships among them. This has taken over and had taken a life on their own. The UN is still important, but it's not the only game in town. If we teach a course in global governance that I do, we don't begin and end with the UN system. We bring in regional organizations, partnerships, corporations, and we bring in how all these things are coming together to create a multiplex system. A multipolar world is led by only great powers, like the Europeans before World War II. A multiplex world is multiple actors. I think Professor Jean made a wonderful sentence. Multiple parties roaming around the world. That's what is happening. You just go and see, they're roaming around the world. No, not everybody is going to the UN or European Union, with due respect, of course. So global governance is in demand because people want it. And of social media, people empowered by social media, NGOs. That's going to grow as the traditional actors, which Trump pushes them over the cliff, the traditional form of global governance. These things will be there. And this will be a world of complexity. It will be less US-centered, less UN-centered. It will be also driven by the government plus activity, which will be one of the things that's going to happen, and I'll end there. It'll be issue-specific. Not everybody is going to lead in every area of global governance. Okay. So the European Union, again, leads on climate change regulation. There's no question about it. And China is increasingly getting in by producing technology that helps climate change. To me, China becoming the leading supplier of EV is good news, not bad news. Maybe it's bad news for the European Union, but I think this will contribute to global governance of climate change. Similarly, there are countries at the regional level. Indonesia, can't think of any cooperation in Southeast Asia without Indonesia, in Southern Africa without South Africa, in Western Africa without Nigeria, and South America without Brazil. So if you bring, and cities are getting in, cities are playing an important role at the sub-national level in climate change governance and pandemic.
Okay, I think
so all this is going to be the future of global governance, and this is the only hope we have for the future, probably the best hope, and let's welcome it, embrace it, and not regret it.
Okay, thank you, Professor Amitav. Absolutely, I think you mentioned one point I think particularly interests us is I say Trump wants to be a peace president. Yeah, we hope he got the Nobel Peace Prize, if he did that. And actually, CCG published a report next day after the US election that Trump 2.0, what are the challenges and opportunity for both China and the US. So we actually, you can scan that. We have a barcode outside the conference room to come. So let's welcome Jeff Nakiville, the president of Asia Pacific Foundation for Canada. Thank you. Yeah. So that is really a good point that I would like to emphasize is that if he wants to make a peace, that China, as the largest trading partner for both Russia and Ukraine, largest trading partner for Gulf countries, second largest trading partner for Israel, China can help. I mean, also North Korea, we did that first term with Trump on North Korea nuclear issues. So I think if China and US can work together on peace, that probably is the biggest dividend that we can get out of the Trump administration. And he's a businessman, he wants peace. That's fine, we would love to work on that. Okay, I'd like to invite Madame Chen Wenlin. Yeah. Madame Chen is also a top thinker from a top Chinese think tank, which is actually China, he's the chief economist of China Center for International Economic Exchanges, which is under the NDRC, probably the most authoritative think tank on economic affairs. 陈文林这个首席经济学家国经中心请陈文林教授您讲。
I am also thankful to CCG for inviting me to this forum. CCG's meetings are always graced by distinguished guests from different parts of the world. We are gathered together to exchange views. This is of great significance. We are at a historical juncture. And here we are talking about Trump 2.0. I think it is not just an issue of much interest to Chinese and American scholars, but of interest to the global audience. So I'm going directly to the topic. How to see Trump 2.0? First, Trump is going back now. He is coming back now. And there are three changes. First, he has become a national leader. In the first administration, he was a simple president, and after 4 years in administration, after 4 years in difficulties and almost put into prison, and now he is coming back with a strong power of tradition and execution and legislation. And he is also building a strong administration team. And third, he is also fostering the future generations of the Republican Party, and we can see many in their 30s and 40s in his team. They are not just randomly selected. They are also elites, and they have a very good educational background. And although they may have different political ideas, and also I think Trump probably will bring huge impacts to global trade, global investment, and global trading rules. Probably he will trouble the sea of global trade. Probably there will be some harms. However, on the other hand, I guess the impacts or the harms down to U.S. domestic politics may be even more serious. He started from harming others, but finally he's coming back to harming themselves. I issued 2 books, actually. I analyzed Trump administration before he assumes the position and after he left the position. You know, today's China, today's world, and today's United States are different from 8 years ago. So I believe his administration, his new administration, will have more impacts domestically than globally. And there will be 6 highs and 4 turmoils. 1 high is high tariffs, but the burden will be shouldered by the United States. In the last administration, 94% are shouldered by U.S. companies and consumers. And this round over, that will be the same. And second high inflation. Biden increased interest rates, and now the inflation is 2.5%. If high tariffs will be implemented, the inflation will rebound immediately. Third high debts, now 36 trillion. And for Trump, probably it is over 7 trillion. And probably for Trump, it will be about 50 trillion. And also high interest rates. Now the interest rate is adjusted downward. Quite probably, when he comes back into administration, there will be high interest rates, and he will adopt a tightening monetary and fiscal policy. And fifth, high virtual economy, which means that the U.S. economy will become more virtual. In his administration, Powell made a clear signal saying that the financial derivatives already reached 600 trillion U.S. dollars, but probably that's not enough. And if we counting the beats and many other virtual currencies, and also the virtual currencies produced by the Trump family, and probably he will push for those virtual currencies, and probably he wants to ensure that when the U.S. dollar is going down, the virtual currencies will become alternatives. But that will only make the U.S. economy more virtual. You know, when the economy becomes more virtual, they will become bubbles, and the bubbles will finally break anyway. Sixth, there will be high uncertainties for the United States. I think the bipartisan, racial, and sex conflicts have reached the peak. No country can be like the United States in terms of gender, 97 genders altogether. Just imagine. And no country can be like the United States in terms of racial tensions, and no country can be like the United States in terms of partisan conflicts. So I think Mr. Trump will bring more harms to the United States than to the whole world. Sixth, high uncertainties. I think mainly 3 points. First, when the United States imposes high tariffs, protectionism, and populism, those are uncertain, and we cannot predict anything as a result of that. And now, second, they are working on many things. For example, the Ukraine-Russian conflicts, which are made into greater escalations, and also sanctions on more companies, and altogether 700 Chinese companies are under sanctions from the United States, including over 300 during the first Trump administration and over 400 during the Biden administration. And now he wants to impose sanctions on an additional 140. And Mr. Trump said that his tariff will be not just 100% or 200% or even 1,000% in tariffs. So that is just crazy. So the WTO mechanism stops working. So that is a big pitfall. So will Trump really follow up on that? Yes, he will take office on January the 20th. I don't think Biden will turn over to Trump smoothly. There will be a lot of difficulties for Trump to tackle because there have been too many pitfalls developed during the Biden administration. And another thing is that Trump is trying to break the existing relationships among big powers. Will it come true? And what changes will that bring to the world? So there are a lot of uncertainties about that. The most important uncertainty is about the leading team of the new administration. Now it is ego, and it is hardcore, it is aggressive, but probably you will come up with a lot of reforms, for example, government efficiency, etc. However, are these reforms good things or bad things? We don't know what will be the consequences like. Nobody can be sure about that. So I think Mr. Trump faces more challenges than opportunities, actually. So before he comes into office, I think we need to officially raise the suggestions to him. That is to do a good job in managing the relations with big powers, respect international rules and orders, maintain global peace. He said that he is a peace president and he wants to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And we would congratulate him if he really can get that prize, because that is a big contribution to the world. We respect him. We will congratulate him for that. But he cannot do anything to just make trouble to the world, because that is also bad for the United States. You want to increase tariffs, so you have trade ties with over 120 countries. Will you raise tariffs on all those 120 countries? Will all those countries just stay idle and accept your tariffs? So you should not only listen to the views of your own team, you should also listen to the voices of the whole world, especially the voices from CCG. Okay, thank you very much. Wonderful sharing.
You mentioned about 6 categories of Trump's new 2.0 pros and cons, but particularly you mentioned about the outcome. If the current global order is not maintained, and if there's too much disruption, it will not also serve U.S. right. So, all those good points. So as I said, this is not only the policy recommendation for Chinese government, but also we are trying to make some recommendations, suggestions for the upcoming U.S. government as well. So thank you, Madam Chen. Next, I would like to invite Michael Gerasi. He's the former Deputy Minister of State of the Minister of Economic and Development, Republic of Italy for the government. So you've been watching China, EU, China, US, and traveling back and forth. Let's hear from you. Also, he's a professor at NYU in Shanghai. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will be brief, and I give you just some points, and maybe there's no time to elaborate. First of all, I think we need to be clear that the EU-China relationship really does not exist, because China does have relationship with individual member states, not with the EU as such, except for the only one thing that the EU does, which is trade policy, so tariffs and stuff like that. But in terms of foreign policies, in terms of investment, even climate, even support or not for Russia or Ukraine, each of the countries within the European Union have different views, and there is really no unity within the EU on each of those topics. There's not even unity on trade policies, but by law, trade policies decided in Brussels, not member states. Otherwise, even that would have divergent views. So China understands this very well, and does forge a relationship mostly with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of certain states, certain countries, and less so with others. I don't want to mention names, but Minister of Foreign Affairs Baerbock visit to Beijing yesterday, in my view, was one of the most disastrous state visit of any member of a large European countries into China, coming here to lecture about what China should do. So I do also think that not only we do not have a unified policy, not only China knows that we don't have it, but also the less we make announcement, I think the better will be for the relationship. For example, we talked earlier on that China, President von der Leyen has defined China as a systemic rival. From a strategic game theory point of view, even if China was a true systemic rival or even existential for the EU, which is not, it's not the best idea really to announce it. If you have an enemy and you want to do wars with them, you don't call them up and say, hey, you are now my target of my next policies. So this is a general view. On the specifics of Trump and Biden, I think there is an opportunity that Trump may fix what is instead, rather than a China-EU, China-US tension, which is a horizontal level in between, let's say, countries. I think we are experiencing what I define as a vertical struggle between certain European governments, let's call it Western governments, and the companies of those very countries. Some CEOs of large European and American companies, Musk, Tim Cook, they don't come to China accompanied by Anthony Blinken. They come alone. The CEO of BASF, BMW, Audi, of course, they don't bring Annalena Baerbock to their meetings. It's a liability, not an asset. And this really highlights a little bit of a struggle that I call it a vertical struggle, as almost as if certain governments in certain, not all, in certain European countries, instead of maybe with the goal of finding external enemy, and China is an obvious target, because politicians need to create monsters to get consensus, and trust me because I'm a politician and I think I know that, this creation of a monster that is anti-China view then actually is what the individual companies and citizens of their own countries need to pay. It's not going to be China. And we have the example on tariffs. EU has put tariff on Chinese imports of electric vehicles. Why? If you read the detailed report by the European Union, and I invite you to do so with a critical eye, and if you disagree with me, feel free to let me know later, there is nothing in the report that says that China is doing dumping or unfair competition. All the report says is that a BYD car costs less than a BMW cars in the German market. But cheaper does not mean subsidy and does not mean unfair competition. So we are also in a situation where the analysis that is needed in this complex world almost seems to have been forgotten in exchange for an ideological view. And finally, then going back to Trump, that may solve this vertical struggle, and maybe Elon Musk could play a role through his Tesla and through his role in the government. So if we have now a reconnection between governments of the US, governments of European countries, that finally start doing the interest of their own companies, and they become an asset, not a liability for their own citizens, for their own companies, then I think the transactional approach, Amit was talking Trump T, transactional, that is, I think we all agree, it's less ideological. You know, the Biden and the Dem party would never accept, and I say in inverted commas because that's what they say, the Chinese Communist Party economic performance, socially and economically, is better than our liberal democracies. So it's very hard to swallow that China does 7%, 8% for the last 9 years, 9% for the last 40 years, and even 5% now, while we in Europe have 0.6 to 0.7 growth. So this is an ideological, very bitter bite for the West to swallow. Now, if we put away this ideological approach, the hope is that maybe the transactional approach to Trump could help solve those problems. I conclude with a very simple and, forgive me, a very trivial approach. What does Trump want from China? He wants to fill the trade deficit, okay? By the way, this is completely wrong from any economic view. Trade deficit or trade surplus have no meaning in bringing or taking away economic benefit for the country. That's another problem that we have in Europe, that we think that the trade deficit with China hurts us. Instead, it's a benefit for us. I have a trade deficit with Starbucks every day and growing and perpetual. I don't go to Starbucks and say, need to buy my economic report to balance the trade. So China has what Trump wants. China has the money to buy more made in USA goods. I think, Harry, you mentioned some soybeans from Wisconsin, and everyone will be happy with that. So that's the positive view. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think, U.S., China, EU, three largest economy in the world. You're probably going to, after Trump, to power a romance of three kingdoms. And then we probably will need EU to do more to mediate China-U.S. relations, because China and EU have a lot of similarity, like, wants to defend multilateral system, climate change, WTO. Those are really not really favored by the U.S., or particularly for Trump. So I think there's enormous opportunity now also for China and EU to get together. Now, I'd like to invite another distinguished expert, Dr. Liu Sijin. He was a former Vice Minister, Development Research Center of the State Council of China, and he has many policy impact also here in China. So, Professor Liu Sijin, your turn. Liu Sijin 主任，请讲。
The floor is yours. Thank you, Harry. So the topic for today actually is the commonly concerned question actually to all the communities in the world. So the Trump administration 2.0, I think we have to look at the landscape. Now the world is experiencing a lot of challenges or frustrations, or the backlash of the world trend. And we believe that the current consequence is something that is a natural result of the development of the history. In history, we experience the technological revolution, globalization, or opening up from China perspective. That would increase the productivity. That would benefit some people. In the beginning, it only benefited some people, some of them, and the rest of them can enjoy some benefit, but not as large as the first group. Then the divide is getting wider and wider to some point where the disturbances and instabilities will be created, and some radical things, for example, the wars or conflicts or some chaos will be created in some regions. And now we are at this turning point. Now, the Trump, some initiatives from Trump, if we zoom in, we can see the similarities of some issues in history, like the high tariff in U.S. for a long time has adopted very high tariff, 30% to 50%, until 1960s, when tariffs are being reduced to a certain level. Globalization is on the way, and U.S. right now is entering into the era featuring tertiary industry. It is not only the manufacturing or service only, it is actually the servicing all. And now the tariffs is slapped even higher, and Trump is actually obsessed with the high tariff right now, even to the neighbors. And when the political issues and the contradictions cannot be tackled, the tariff will be the final reserve. But I don't think tariff is the best and smart solution. To some degree, they're not upgrading their industry, but degrading the industry. So the kind of backshoring the industry to U.S. is the counter-trend of globalization. It is actually a backlash, and it is a setback of its own development. And Harry mentioned, what is the implication of the Trump 2.0? Yes, we would have some impact from this kind of change of the administration from U.S. On one hand, China's export is our strength, but we have to expand the internal consumption and internal market. That is a huge challenge in front of us. So Trump, if the Trump slapped higher tariff to China, in face of this stress, we have to turn around to tackle our internal consumption issue, to expand the consumption, expand the demand from within. So the consumption demand compared to OECD countries at the similar stage of the development, the consumption demand in China compared to OECD countries is only at 68 to 75% of the scale of the OECD countries at the same level or stage of development. That is 1/3 or 1/5 less. It is not a very small gap. It is a huge delta. I call it as a structural bias. And so the issue in front of us is to how to expand the consumption demand. We have to initiate some structural reform. We have to increase dramatically the public service to the low-income communities. And the central government, when providing the public service like the medical care, elderly care, and education, and so on and so forth, must take more responsibilities. And second, we have to further enhance urbanization in China. I fully endorse the advocates on the studies on the rural land reforms from CCG, and I'm also specialized in this field. I believe the urban-rural land reforms has to be accelerated ASAP, so that we can push forward the second chapter of urbanization in China. We have a huge potential to develop the small towns, medium-sized towns in China in rural area. So urbanization is a must that we have to work on to expand the domestic consumption. And the third one is that we, in the next step, must stabilize our expectation and confidence, especially the private economy. Their enthusiasm and passion has to be encouraged, and we have to create the level playing field to create more jobs by encouraging the development of these private sectors, especially for the youth. And both the income and the employment opportunities are highly stressed to the young people, and we have to create opportunities for them.
Generally speaking, in the past, we often said that we need to promote reform through opening up, and now we are opening wider, but in this process, we are also facing more pressures. So I believe we still have the good opportunities. So if we look at the result or impacts of Trump 2.0, it will have impacts on the United States and on the world. It will also have impacts on China. Probably they cannot imagine that yet. But for us, we will still grasp the opportunity for a new round of reform and opening up. Thank you, Minister.
Particularly, like your idea that actually Trump will actually stimulate China to work even harder to stimulate domestic economy, particularly the urbanization, and also this lowest hanging fruit, about 300 million migrant workers that lives in the urban center. China has 260 cities with a population above 1 million, and 300 million migrant workers are not really able to sell their household land back in the rural area, but also they have to rent another space at city. There's a huge waste redundancy there, and of course also their children and the seniors have to stay there, so that you have 9 billion people travel around during the Chinese New Year, unprecedented in the world anywhere. So I think this, if we can really allow them to sell their household land, and then just like in the 90s, allow the 400 million urban residents to privatize their apartment, you're going to have another 20 years boom of China real estate. So that's really a good idea. Now I'd like to invite another guest, Dr. Mohammed Amassi, founder and chairman of Amassi Foundation, which is very active internationally, and you just traveled from UK for an event. And we have quite a few experts travel from different regions. And you are representing the Middle East voice. I would like to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Henry. Let me start by saying that the spots on a leopard never change. So Trump 1 and Trump 2 is the same human being, the same person. There is some difference, though. Trump 2 is inheriting power which he did not have during Trump 1. Trump 2 will control Congress. Trump 2 controls the Supreme Court, and Trump 2 completely controls the Republican Party. So that's a very big difference between 1 and 2 in terms of the power he has at his disposal. If one wants to look at where Trump 2 will go, I think it's important to look at some of his campaign slogans. So, make America great again is one. Trump will fix it too. In Trump 1, it was America first, but not America alone. Trump 2 is going to be both America first and America alone, where might will always be right. Power sharing will not be entertained unless there is a transactional need for sharing power. And if you look at what has happened in his early appointments, there are a few things or a few points that I think are important. He, I think, displays very well that for my friends and my family, everything, but for my enemies, the law. That signifies how he's going to look at his appointments, and that's what he has done. In Russia, they speak of the power ministries, which is those that have got significant legal and coercive capacity. In the United States, these include the Justice Department, the Defense Department, the FBI, and the intelligence community. If you look at the Trump appointees on these positions, each of these is a very loyal friend, and this is a move designed to remove obstacles that would stop him from being able to do what he wants to do with the armed forces, with federal law enforcement agents, intelligence professionals, government lawyers, i.e. he would like to be governing unbound by law or constitution. There are people who say that if you want to assemble the infrastructure of an autocratic state, then this is how you do it. Many other states who are veering towards becoming autocratic and embracing this form of governance will be watching intently to see how this unfolds. And what does this mean for global democracy, especially when the chief gamekeeper turns poacher? I think that we will have a very challenging few years ahead. And let's go to some key themes now. My assessment of Trump as a person, and I did have some chance to work with him when I was in New York in my earlier days, is that he is a firm believer of my way or the highway, which means that no such thing as sharing power or institutions will matter to him unless those institutions are largely going to do his bidding for him. Anything else will not work for him. His approach to foreign policy will largely be transactional, but it is one thing where you can talk the talk, it's another when you have to walk the walk. I think Trump 2 will inherit a different world to Trump 1. It's a world in which there are three major conflicts being played out. It's a world in which BRICS is now much more defined and well-formed. It's a world in which there will be at least three power blocks he will have to deal with, Russia, EU, and China. And I don't believe that his mindset is one where he will say, oh, well, my friends are Europeans or Chinese or Russians. This will be very transactional. What works for the US is what he will do. And if it means stepping on shoes, on feet, I don't think he will care. But I think it's very important that he will have to very quickly realize that there are things that he can control, and then there are things that he simply cannot control. His approach to conflicts is going to be to use the economic power that the United States has. So we are going to see an increasing use of sanctions as well as tariffs as a manifestation of his foreign policy going forward. I think he is less prone to engage in costly and never-ending wars, so he will do whatever it takes to stop the present conflicts. But in trying to do this, compromises will have to be made, which will not be to the liking of any person. In the Middle East, which is my specialty, he will have to confront at least three big issues. Issue number one is a nuclear Iran. Should this be allowed or not? Issue number two is statehood for Palestine. And issue number three is the sovereignty of many states in the Middle East and the role of non-state actors. All these issues are intertwined. And my final point, and I know I'm running out of my 5 minutes, so I will stop by making one final point, is that the issue of America first and America alone means that when the Global South tells him that you are hypocritical in your behavior, you are not adopting the same principles, I'm not sure that he or America care about hypocrisy, double standards. These are all nice things to say, but America will do whatever makes sense for the United States. And so I think we are going to, it's not that the United States that will have to adopt to how the world will react. It's how the world will have to adapt to how the US will react, which will be the defining way going forward for the rest of the world, because the US is too powerful militarily and the dollar is too powerful as a currency for it to go away in the next 5 or 10 years. Any marginalization of this is going to take a very, very long time. And finally, I would say that it's like dating, or it's like choosing a wife or a husband. You have one person that says, I am the strongest, I have been the strongest. If you come with me, you will always be protected, always be defended, you will always be a friend, and you have nothing to worry about. And the other vision is, look at me, I'm a humanist, I care for the world, I care for the people, I care for the climate issues, I'm likable, so please come with me. This is the two broad choices that the world will have to face, and the individual countries will decide which way they want to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think your last metaphor vividly described the current predicament we are in. But anyway, I think first and me alone, that is really, I don't think that take a high moral ground. But of course, we need to go high rather than go low, even though sometimes you're very pragmatic. But I think we do have a global village as a whole. So it's one thing, all thing, and one rise, all rise. We probably will have to do with that, with particularly climate change. Now I'd like to invite Madame Susan Jessup. She's the Chief Executive, Asia New Zealand Foundation. I know you just come from New Zealand, and your foundation is very active. We've been to New Zealand and witnessed how effective your foundation is, particularly in the New Zealand-China relation, but also South Pacific-China relation. So I'd like to hear from you, from New Zealand perspective.
Thank you very much, Henry, and thank you, Mabel, and thank you to your centre and your team for hosting us all. We're all glad we're think tankers. It's been so uplifting this morning. But I'd like to bring a perspective from New Zealand, which is, I think as many of you will know, a distant maritime nation for whom trade rather than security has been traditionally our existential concern when we look out into the world. And I would like to talk a little bit about small state mentality when we look at the current macro picture and our need to find strength and unity in the face of uncertainty. New Zealand has been an ardent multilateralist, recognising that this is the most effective way for us to shape the global system and ensure our participation in it. To our north lies the South Pacific, a region of 14 even smaller island nations whose primary existential challenge is climate change, a crisis compounded by development challenges, demographic shifts, resource pressures, rising debt, inflation, and transnational threats. And these overlapping challenges in our region diminish our region's resilience, but frankly also our capacity or even inclination to engage in strategic competition. But whether we're prepared or not, we recognise that strategic competition is moving towards us. And today's forum is examining, as we're examining today, we are facing rapid changes in leadership style and practice, which Trump is fairly emblematic of. And as a result, countries like ours are increasingly looking to one another, to other small and medium-sized countries, to consult and to carefully navigate an ever more contested world order. We're scaling up our defences, not to assist major powers, but because of them. We are doubling down our commitment to both mini and multilateralism because we cannot afford to relinquish engagement in our region or abandon the rules that govern us and give us a voice and a place at the table. So in short, our job is to remain constructive as small countries, to seek opportunities, and where possible to serve as the architects of innovative solutions for trade, development, technology and environmental sustainability. we are going to have to remain in good company, using our collective voice to advocate for peace and stability while protecting ourselves from the excesses of major power actions. And ultimately, we're going to have to stand alongside those who share our values. The challenges ahead are complex, and as we've heard this morning, in some respects, the problem identification is the easier part. The real difficulty lies in crafting solutions in a world where power, security, and self-interest dominate, and where global connectivity, openness, efficiency, and rules are eroding. In this context, there's an opportunity for smaller and medium-sized countries to show leadership and really look to pilot solutions and see if we can then scale them. In New Zealand's experience working with partners like Singapore and Brunei and Chile, we've been able to do this. A recent example is the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, which is a trade agreement focused on digital economy and topics such as artificial intelligence, digital inclusion, and digital identities. Signed originally by Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore, it's since expanded to include Korea, and now a number of other countries, including major countries, are applying to join. So I think that's the role that small countries will take, as we can't sit around wringing our hands. We are going to have to be the architects and see if we can pilot and scale solutions. I've got 40 seconds left. I think I'll leave it there, but let me conclude by acknowledging China's efforts to lift tariffs. I think it's great that you have open to visa-free status. I think it's great that you're offering climate solutions. It's really important that we continue to convene Track 2 dialogues such as this, so thank you, Henry and Mabel. Student exchanges are important, and really we have to continue to lean into these types of conversations so that we are looking for solutions in an increasingly troubled times. That's 4 minutes, thank you.
Good, yeah, really within your 5 minutes. Thank you very much. But Susan, absolutely, I think New Zealand, I mean, you are saying small, but probably also mid-power of some kind, and particularly soft power on international governance. For example, you had the departmental agreement for the CPTPP. You know, China wants to join that. President Xi said China wants to join CPTPP. You also launched the DPA, which is Digital Partnership Agreement, which all those things are really working. I think New Zealand and China also has a very good relation, and we hope that we can maintain the economic globalization alliances rather than the geopolitical alliance and set up. So thank you for your great comments. Next up, Professor Lu Runquan is the president of CPAFFC Economics and Technology Research Institute. I know Professor Lu is a well-known think tank figure in China. He had actually a very famous think tank for the largest, one of the largest oil company in China, CPAFFC. So. Excellent. I know you got recently also into Brazil, and thank you for also mentioning our books, and I'm really pleased to have you here to share your views. Professor Lu.
Okay, thank you for the invitation from the CCG. If I will use one sentence to describe what I will say that let the energy and climate the interactions to be one of the largest consensus or intersection between China and US, especially in the Donald Trump's second administration. When we look back the first administration, Donald Trump, we found that his slogan is "Let America Great Again." In my own opinion, a big case on that is let America's oil and gas great again, because it is in his term, the first term, that the United States oil and gas becomes the largest oil producer and also the largest gas producer. You know, that is very important for the United States for his power implementation. And also that is why that the United States can export large natural gas and LNG to Europe to replace the Russia's oil and gas after the Ukraine-Russia war. You know, that is very important. Okay, So we will say that is oil and gas actually let America great again. This is the first point. The second, we still remember that in Donald Trump's first term, that he visited China on the 2017, the November, and signed the 4 big projects contract with China energy sector. That is, let's say, the China's central enterprises will invest huge that in United States. However, later on, next year, we enter the era of big power competition, and the China-US trade war happened. So all of these actions and the contracts are not allowed to implement it in the United States. However, only one project was executed and implemented. That is, US can export natural gas and oil to China, because China in the last 10 years and in the future 10 years will be the largest oil and gas importer, in the world. So that is, we will say, only one project was implemented. And last year, let's say, and about 3 million tons of LNG was imported from the United States, and also about 10 million tons of crude oil was imported from the United States. The total volume, I mean, the value is about $10 billion US dollars. However, it is still far behind the China-US trade deficit. So we can say now that China-US, the energy interactions, especially in the oil and gas interactions, plays as a small balance block, but it still play a big role in the China-US trade deficit. Okay. The third point I want to reiterate that now we come back to, let's say we come into the second item, the Donald, let's say 2.0. So what about the policy? What about the energy policy? When we actually really don't know. However, we can look at the history. We may predict the future. I think at least the 3 features of the Donald's energy policy. The first is continue to push forward the oil and gas development and production to guarantee the #1 in the world and to make full use of the United States power. The second one is enhance oil and gas export especially to Europe and to China to keep the economic benefits and the geopolitical competency. The third one is release the environmental restrictions on fossil energy, and however, inhibit the development of electrical vehicles and the new energy resources, not as a balanced administration. They take the IRA, the chips, and let's say to encourage the electrical vehicles, to encourage the renewable energies. However, Donald Trump maybe will not do that. The example is he nominated another oil gas president to be the next Secretary of DOE. Department of Energy of the United States. This guy is Chris Waite. Chris Waite is actually the president of Liberal Energy Company. Actually he's an oil guy. He's a traditional oil guy. Okay, so then when we look at future, what about the next step of China and the U.S. Energy transactions? I think at least the 3 aspects. The first one is in climate. We still have some overlaps and common benefits, let's say in CCS and CCUS, carbon capture and storage. And also in, let's say in, another one is methane control. That's a methane emission. Because besides the CO2, methane leakage is also very important to the climate and the greenhouse effects, So the 2 countries can shake hands and continue the Sunnyland's contract. Okay, the second one is actually just I mentioned the South and market. Okay, the United States now is the largest natural gas exporter, and we are the largest importer. So the overlapping, the synergy should be stronger in the future, hopefully. Okay. Actually, according to the contract signed, the highest volume China can import from the United States is 25 million tons. 25 million tons. At least 10 times then the volume has been implemented. The last but the most important, I think, is for the international companies overlapping in the third market, just like CNPC, as Mr. Wang mentioned, with, let's say, ExxonMobil, with Chevron, they can shake hands in Iraq, in Mozambique, in Guyana. Actually, now, the mega projects, 10 mega projects, this total investment of, the joint investment from China and US companies will reach to 200 billion US dollars. That's a huge. So from my own perspective, I'm optimistic on the future energy and climate interactions between China and the US. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Lu. Excellent point. I think, if Trump wants to make a deal, who else would be best deal maker, a partner? I think China probably could be the best because, as you said, there's billions of dollars on the energy sector, there's billions of dollars on the agricultural food, but also, the China, 70% of China energy consumption depends on the import, and China even spend more on chips import than energy. So you see, there's so huge opportunities for U.S. and China. If he's a businessman, let's make a deal together. So for a better environment for the world. So thank you for your comment. I'd like to have Professor Felix Vadivoso. He's the chairman of China Science IE University, a very famous university based in Madrid. Your president is a good friend. He attended our Munich Security Roundtable. So I'm glad you came also. Let's hear from you.
Thank you very much. Well, a lot of things have been said, and I would like to leverage on some of the things that the speakers have said. For instance, Professor Qin Xin, he talked about the middle classes, which I think are very important, and I'll say something later about that. Also, Madame Chan, she said that Mr. Trump will be only bad for the U.S., for its domestic policies. Michele talked about that there is no relation, if I understood you well, Mr. Geraci, Michele Geraci, there is no relation or common policy between the EU and China. And Mr. Amersi insisted on the fact that in Trump 2.0 is going to be Trump alone, right? Well, Henry Wang has this book that I recommend, The Ebb and Flow of Globalization. I had a quick look, I couldn't read it, but I had a quick look at it. And one of the epigraphs says, no country is alone, right? In my humble capacity as a poet, I instantly recognize, of course, the verse by John Donne, no man is an island, right? And the talk today has been about cooperation and cooperation. But contradictory or counteractively, we are having a new president that says he wants to stand alone. I don't believe he can stand alone, and he'll have to cooperate. In which degree, we will see, right? And the second thing I want to say is, why is he there? I don't think he's there on his own either. I think he's just the point of an iceberg that has shown its most fierce face in the US, right, with President Trump, but we had some other examples before that, some other politicians. And the thing I want to drop on the table is this. In the 60s, the CEOs discussed whether they were earning too much money. And they were earning, at the time, 20 times more than the less paid worker. And they discussed about whether they should learn less. These days, it's between 300 and 400 times more that they earn, and they don't discuss whether they have to earn less. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Professor Felix. You save us some time too. Absolutely, I think no man is alone, and we have to work together with this global earth that we live in. So thank you for your comment. Now, last but not least, I'd like to recommend Jeff Nakiview. He's the president of Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, which is one of the most famous think tank in Canada. So you are coming from Canada. And also you have worked with the Canadian government as a diplomat in Beijing, but also work at the CIDA, Canadian International Development Agency, which is a long-standing organization. Now it's merged with ministry, but used to do a lot of foreign aid projects in China, made huge contributions in many developments. So I'd like to hear from you. Jeff, please. Also, we know that Justin Trudeau was in Malaga just a few days ago, and Trump said 25% tariff for Canada. What does Canadian think about that?
Well, there's a lot of talk about that. So first of all, let me say a big thank you, Henry, to you and to CCG. It's nice to be back here again this year. And I am of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. I am the CEO. Not that kind of CEO, unfortunately. I'm the not-for-profit kind of CEO. And our foundation, 加拿大亚太基金会, is a national public institution, but independent from government. So I do not speak as an official of the government of Canada. As you mentioned, Henry, the world that some of you are anticipating of tariff threats is one that Canada is already in, along with Mexico since last week. We're already experiencing this. It is not, generally speaking, has not been a cause for panic because we have been through this before. And I think the fact that the tariff threats are being wielded on non-economic issues, to me, is perhaps an indication. All of these things are going to be so hard to predict. I think we all agree. But I think perhaps an indication that this is an aspect of negotiation. This is not, although Mr. Trump, since the 1980s, has been a fervent advocate of tariffs, I'm not sure that we will see that vision realized of an American state that draws more tax revenue from tariffs than from income tax. And of course, as the economists will tell you, tariffs are about the most regressive form of tax and affect the poorest consumers, the poorest members of society disproportionately. I think if we're now, Henry, in the world of the romance of the three kingdoms, then countries like Canada, like New Zealand, many other countries in the world, we have to conduct ourselves like the General Zhuge Liang, to be agile, to be listening for the birds, the winds, to feel the moisture in the air, and to be able to navigate difficult terrain. A European companion of Zhuge Liang would be Odysseus. So we need to be wily like Odysseus. I think what we will find going forward in this new world that we are facing is that markets will play a significant role. I think in two respects. One is that we know President-elect Trump has always been very focused on the performance of the New York Stock Exchange and the related indexes, and I think that could be a mitigating factor when it comes to implementing certain types of economic policies, the way the markets will respond. The markets also respond, of course, through the currency values. And it's been noted, and I think it's worth continuing to focus on the fact that there are structural factors. When we look at the US and we look at China, there are structural factors in both economies that can explain a lot that will not be resolved by tariff policy or trade wars. It has to do with savings rates, with deficits, with structural imbalances between consumption and investment, and government borrowing and spending that express themselves in currency valuations that themselves are a major driver of where you will have bilateral deficits and where you will have surpluses. I think a fact of life, we really need to keep in mind people, households, families all over the world. The fact of life is that everything we're talking about is going to make life more expensive. Now, we already, for the last couple of years, because of Russia's illegal war of conquest in Ukraine, have seen, inflationary pressures. But as we get into a world of tariffs and bilateral trade deals, it's not just expensive at the consumer level, but for business people, it is a much more complicated terrain to navigate as we move away from WTO as the standard to various regional and bilateral agreements, and that makes things more expensive. But I think there are workarounds, and I'd like to pick up on Susanna's comments about where we have coalitions of willing economies that, we need to get on with our lives. And I think it's important to recognize that there's a lot that happens in the world that is not about the US, that is not about China. But I think for China there are opportunities to find partners, and I think the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, is a very good example of a high-quality trade agreement that is expanding. The UK has just joined in meetings held in Vancouver last week that I attended, chaired by Canada. It was announced that Costa Rica would be now move into a process of a working group. But we have very significant economies that have applied, and I would love to see a speedy process to consider very carefully applications. We have Indonesia has recently now joined the queue. That's very significant. But also we have APEC economies, the People's Republic of China, the economy known in APEC as Chinese Taipei, have both applied, and I think it would be a good thing for the region and the world if we can find a path forward to expand the CPTPP to include such economies. And I'll just mention on a bright spot, and I do apologize sincerely, Henry, for coming up to the stage late. I flew overnight from Jakarta, where Canada and Indonesia have just announced the conclusion of the negotiations, successful conclusion of negotiations for an economic partnership agreement. So, there is forward motion in this world. I think the digital economic partnership pioneered by New Zealand is another example of that. And I think within the world of APEC, CPTPP, and related, related groupings, there is potential. And even within WTO, there is the group of countries, including Canada, that have agreed to create an alternative dispute resolution mechanism and agreed to bind themselves to that mechanism. So there is, I think, reason to be optimistic that the rest of us around the world will continue to try to advance, the cause of freer trade and economic liberalization with a view to being able to include people at all levels of our society in the fruits of trade. And so I guess my message is that we need to get on with our lives, but I do think there's an opportunity for China to join in such groupings, and it would be a win-win, I think, to see that happen. So apologies again for my late arrival, but I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your strong support for the multilateralism, and of course, I think Canada, New Zealand, and many European countries are very strong supporter for the multilateralism, WTO, and all the rest. That's good to hear. We still got a very big force and hope for that. So thank you. Now I think we're getting close, but I would really like to invite two young leaders to come on stage. Ms. Magdalena Rodovok, he's the program director, Young Blood Strategic Forum, based in Slovenia. And also, another, we'll talk about Indonesia. We had Mr. Hasim Rod Tempemora. He's the advisor, External Office of President of the Republic of Indonesia, come to stage. So I would like to, both young leaders, I know Strategic Forum is a very famous forum in Europe, and also our Indonesia friends advising your president. So maybe you can give a bit of observation about yourself, and also any question you want to raise to our panelists. So we still got about 10 minutes, so why don't you start and you have a mic, and we would like to hear from you. Yeah. Madagena, maybe why don't you start first? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for the word and the opportunity to address the whole. About Blade Strategic Forum. Blade Strategic Forum is the leading conference in Southeastern Europe. We are based in Slovenia, taking place in Bled, one of the, according to some, one of the 7 wonders of the world. We are dedicated to an open dialogue about the most pressing issues of today, seeking for the solutions of tomorrow. And I'm here as a program director of Young Blade Strategic Forum, so kind of a platform where we provide perspectives of youth at the main forum to the participants. And about my question, I'd like to pose it to Mr. Amersi, please, because you have mentioned BRICS as a rising power. And it's a question about the recent summit in Kazan. An alternative, so BRICS, cross-border payment system was mentioned as an alternative to the current SWIFT system. How do you assess the feasibility of this springing? Is Trump 2.0 going to jumpstart this process? And is there, as far as my understanding goes, trust is kind of the main factor, building block in establishing such a cross-border system. Is there enough trust among the BRICS countries? How do you see this?
Yeah, maybe before Mohammed get into that, I would like to also introduce a Global Young Leader Dialogue again. It's a platform that we launched with Academy of China World Studies that almost 4 years ago during the pandemic to really promote the dialogue and exchanges between China and global young leaders. Actually, 2021 President Xi wrote us a letter to encourage more such exchanges. So I'm very glad we have about 30 global young leaders coming from every country, and both of them actually traveled directly for this conference. You raised a good question, so Mohammed, why don't you start? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very important question because there is a world now that is increasingly fractured. You have on the one side G7 and you have NATO that represents largely Western powers, but then you have also the counter equivalent to it, which is BRICS and the Global South. When you look at defining issues at the UN today, increasingly these two blocks are getting more and more polarized. I think for BRICS, they have huge potential going forward, but there has to be leadership that is completely aligned as it is in G7. Today what you have is an alignment that is based on common enemy or common anti-interests rather than common pro-interests. So when you look at what is the intersection between Russia, China, and Iran, the intersection is largely their anti-West strategy. But when you then ask, okay, so what is it that you see to be issues or interests that would bring you together, common currency, customs union. So there is a long way to go for BRICS to become a formidable force to counterweight the G7. Likewise, NATO has been in existence for more than 75 years. As opposed to NATO, I wrote an article which I labeled CRINKS, C-R-I-N-K-S. It's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So this is an antidote to NATO. But again, this is based on the fact that we have a common enemy rather than we are aligned in terms of having a military alliance like the NATO Article 5, where an attack on one is equivalent to an attack on anyone. So I think these things will take a long time to develop. But this is where China has a huge opportunity because out of BRICS and out of CRINCS, China is by far the most powerful force. And if we can show leadership in terms of bringing other countries together, not as a way to fight the West, but as a way to explain to the rest of the world that there is an alternative, as I said in my analogy, that we are, or the China should be projecting itself as the person that should be liked by everyone, as opposed to having to force by might, military might, to do what people want.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Okay, I'd like to ask Hassan, you recommended by the Indonesia ambassador to our global young leaders, and I know you have a lot of experience back home and also academically, advising the president of Indonesia also. What's your, maybe make a little introduction and then your question.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to engage with the experts who have shared valuable insights in this session. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Hassan Muri. I am a former advisor to the Executive Office of the President and Executive Director of the Center for Geopolitics and Global Studies of the University of Bung Karno, Jakarta. I have a question for one of the panelists, Mr. Amitav Acharya, distinguished professor of the International Relations, American University. The theme of this session, presaging the future of global governance under Trump 2.0, is highly intriguing. The world today is becoming increasingly complex with a multipolar geopolitical environment. Major countries are deeply involved in shaping the global operating environment, while other nations align with powerful blocs to influence international agendas. In your view, what are some collaborative efforts that could be pursued to mitigate the risk of global political instability that could potentially lead to large-scale destructive conflicts? Furthermore, in the Trump 2.0 era, amidst the competition between the two global economic superpowers, do you believe there is still room for global governmental cooperation, or are we heading towards fragmentation and conflicts within the global community? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amitav, please.
Henry, I owe some time to you because I took longer than I should have, and it's always a problem with me in panels. But I was in Jakarta on a Saturday, addressing 8,000 people for the foreign policy community of Indonesia. We heard Foreign Minister Sugiarno also. I specialize in Indonesian foreign policy. So from that perspective, I would say two things. First, theme of that conference was middle powers. Can middle powers, they should save the world, but actually mitigate is the right word. I think middle powers should step in, and the old days middle powers used to mean Canada, Australia, maybe New Zealand. Now, Indonesia, South Korea, South Africa, they are not great powers. The BRICS are mostly middle powers. They have a role to play. Regional organizations have a role to play. This is about mitigation. You talk about complexity. Complexity is already happening. By complexity, again, I don't use the term multipolar. Multipolar is just about great powers. If you bring in other powers, other actors, it's multiplex, and that's complexity. Complexity means a lot of partnerships and networks. And the literature on global governance is full of examples of how public-private, hybridity, complexity, how different actors cooperate with each other, including American actors, not necessarily the federal government. So the state governments in California and New York have a very different position on climate change than the Trump one. So I am general optimist. I still think Trump is going to last only four more years. Let's look forward to what happens beyond. I think most of the world wants global governance, but in a different way. Not the traditional UN-centered, US-centered global governance. It's much broader, pluralistic. Fragmentation is actually creative. As Schumpeter said, creative destruction. Some destruction is actually creative. You have to destroy something to bring something new.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mohammed, you had something to add. Okay.
So thank you very much for your question. So you have to really analyze that none of these institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, they were all created post-Second World War. And they have largely, I think, played their part, but they are probably not fit for purpose going forward. And there has to be a change. Look at the UN Security Council, 5 members, they veto each other all the time, and it leads to absolute paralysis. So then you have to ask yourself, well, how will change happen? Okay? Whenever somebody has the contractual right to assume a position, it is almost impossible for them to ask to be vacating that position. Nobody will voluntarily do it. So you have to ask yourself, what is the relevance of France? What is the relevance of UK becoming permanent members of the Security Council? Why not India? Why not Brazil? Why not South Africa? These are the emerging powers where their GDP and their global influence is far outweighing the influence, but nobody will give up. Look at the Russian seat on the UN Security Council. The seat was with the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed and it became the Russian Federation, technically that is grounds for Russia to be asked to be vacated. Does anybody have the ability to ask Russia to do that today? No. So what I think is going to happen in the future is that instead of people paying respect to these organizations, which will largely become talk shops where you meet each other, hug each other, pat each other in the back, but nothing actually happens, there will be new organizations created where power will shift to those organizations, and largely these old organizations will be marginalized into oblivion. And the new organizations are, as we said, BRICS, it's CRINCS, it is fragmented organizations that will slowly start to assume power. When technology and AI happens, there will be a new organization that will regulate AI, which will be more powerful than any of the existing organizations, and I think that that's the way forward.
Okay, thank you. I think we're running out of time, but I just want to add one point to the question. Basically, I see EU has an enormous role to mediate China-US relations, but also mid powers are rising, and also Global South, BRICS countries. They all have an enormous role. 80% of Global South can also be, they're not going to picking sides. They're probably going to live through the mediating process throughout the next phase of China-US relations. So we are seeing some hope there, a rising of the middle powers, a rising of the BRICS countries, actually is part of this multipolar world to stabilize the world and balance US-China relations. So on that note, I would really like to thank all the distinguished panelists that we're having here, because this is the opening panel, and we have a global governance on the topic, and then we had an excellent keynote at the opening ceremony this morning, but also we heard we have over 10 experts shared great views, and we have 2 global young leaders represent very impressive institutions that also shared their questions as well. So, but also, of course, we have an audience, a very impressive audience, with over half of them, coming from international, more than half actually. I see so many friendly faces from outside China, or from diplomatic corps, and from different think tanks, and from also media and enterprises. So on behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists, our global young leaders, and our audience. Let's give them a warm applause. Thank you.